Hello, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Magic the Gathering podcast. Yes, that is the title. And today, Princess and I are going to be talking about Star Trek, specifically Deep Space Nine, and what various characters from the show would look like as magic cards. But before we get started, Princess, I actually have, and I didn't tell you this before we started filming.
Oh, gosh.
I actually have to have a message for you. My wife insisted that I say to you, thank you for teaching her all about War and Peace, which apparently she had never read War and Peace and learned quite a lot about it from you on your program, It's Lit.
Yay! I love that. Thank you so much, Mrs. Prof.
And also, if you want to catch that episode, I will link it in this video's description. But also, if you're into Commander, which I hope so, because we're talking Commander today, Princess, you just showed off a bunch of your Commander decks on an episode of your own YouTube channel, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I just kind of wanted to show everybody all of my silly decks, all of my fun art sleeves, and just kind of show like how much fun it is for me and kind of give everyone a taste of how I am as a player, which is chaotic and smashy. So, you know, the best kind of Magic player. The one that won't combo or mill you out, you know, mwah, you're welcome.
Chaos and smash are important qualities to have at least one of in your play group. So if you guys want to check that video out, I'm linking that and a couple other Princess's stuff in the description. Today, however, we are talking Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We were just chatting casually about our love of Deep Space Nine and Star Trek and Magic the Gathering and Commander, and we started just talking to each other about, wouldn't this be who Cisco as a card is, or wouldn't this be who Odo as a card is? And we just said, you know what, we should just stop now, turn on the cameras, and start filming, which is what that was like a month ago, so now we eventually had some time in our schedule.
We made it happen.
We've made it happen.
And it was such an organic idea, too, because we were just like, we just both love Star Trek, and wouldn't it be fun to have both? So we did it.
You were telling me you came to Deep Space Nine recently, right? You're on your first watch through of the series.
I'm on my first watch through of the series. I'm a second generation Trekkie because my mom is actually an OG Trekkie. She watched the original series growing up. She actually took me to see the 2009 movie in theaters and told me I had to watch it because it was important for me to know about Star Trek. So that was her. And then I got into Deep Space Nine because everyone told me that was the one to watch. And 2 summers ago, I finally gave in and I fell in love, and I have a Deep Space Nine tattoo planned for when, you know, quarantine is over. I'm very excited about that. But yeah, it's my favorite Trek so far. I still have to go back and watch the rest of them, but I love it and it's amazing.
You're getting a Deep Space Nine tattoo?
I am.
Oh my goodness! Well, I thought, in case people didn't notice, you're showing off some trill spots.
Yes, my trill spots that I made right before this video. So I apologize for them not being down to the neck.
Are you going to share with us what the Deep Space Nine tattoo is going to be, or do we have to just have you back on to show it off when you get it?
Well, I'll show it off too, but I don't have. So I have a bunch of tattoos on this arm, but I don't have any on this one. So I wanted to get the fleet number for the Defiant ship on my arm over here, just because I love Cisco. I'm so glad he gets his ship, and I love the lore around the Defiant and everything about like the first ship that went back in time. It's great, and I love it, and I was like, I want that. Put it on my skin.
I love, too. A lot of people don't appreciate that Cisco actually designed the Defiant when he was working at the Utopia Planitia shipyards. And a lot of people overlook, I think, Cisco's role as the builder. They didn't put it so much in your face in the show the way they did with, like, Picard the Diplomat, where it's easy to walk away from The Next Generation and say Picard was the diplomat. But Cisco was the builder, and that was because he was trying to build on Bashir, and that they wanted a show that built not in terms of individual episodic things that are disconnected, but rather a connection and a world and everything. And I was just rewatching. I'm on like my 10th. I started watching Deep Space Nine when I was in high school. It got me through high school a lot, along with Magic the Gathering. So I've been through many rewatches, but we were just rewatching Dramatis Personae, where they all take on this other personality and reenact a struggle for power. And in that, under this influence of alien technology and going crazy, Cisco, who becomes kind of like Emperor Nero, he starts building this clock.
Yes!
It's like, it's a clock! It's a clock!
What do you think? What is it? A clock. Fascinating.
But that's again because he's the builder, and one of the most underrated episodes, which is one of my personal favorites, is don't worry, we'll talk about magic in a minute. Is Explorers, where Cisco builds the sunlight ship to fly from Bashir and eventually ends up landing on Cardassia, even though that was not the original goal, spoilers. But he built that, and that was important. It was him and Jake going off together as father and son, and that's the one where Jake said to Cisco, I don't want to join Starfleet. It's you, it's not me, and I want to be a writer. And in high school, I had just gone into this gifted magnet program and found out I did not have what it takes to be an animal biologist, which had been my lifelong dream. And I fell out of the sciences and I discovered a love of writing. And I was writing my first novel at 17, 16 in high school. And that moment where Jake said that, I mean, I had always been a fan of the character before, but I was like, now I always say, I'm like, when everybody says in Star Trek, what would you be? You know, like engineering, sciences, command. And I'm like, I would be Jake Cisco, the writer. That's me in Star Trek.
Yesterday I got a communication from the Pennington School in New Zealand. And they offered me a writing fellowship.
Oh, Jake, that's terrific. I didn't realize you had applied.
Absolutely. He's one of my favorite characters. He's easily in my top 5. And I love, whenever like Father's Day comes around, everyone's like, Space Dad. You always see Darth Vader. But the best Space Dad is Benjamin Cisco. He's an amazing dad. He is so supportive and loving of his son. And just, they have amazing paternal chemistry. Like, not everyone can like make a family seem real on a fictional show, but there's something about the way that he holds him and the way he supports him and the way that they would die for each other. Like, we talked about The Visitor the other day, and like that episode just gutted me because, usually you see the father sacrificing for the son, but seeing the son know that he was robbed of all this time with his father and wanting so much to get that back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Luke and Anakin could never. Like, sorry.
Well, I don't know.
You know that reference.
Can't comment on that because I don't have reference for that.
I'll say
have through pop culture. I've heard of it, but I got to say, my money is on Captain Cisco and Jake as real good father-son relationship there. And yeah, that episode, The Visitor, is the real tearjerker. What a powerful episode. Why don't we start with Captain Cisco then?
Yes.
And precursor going into this, ladies and gentlemen. I know there are a million articles out there. I don't know. I didn't look into if Mark Rosewater has ever done what colors would Deep Space Nine characters be, and if he has, maybe he's going to have said completely different stuff. And you might have very different stuff. And in fact, Princess and I, on a couple of these, have different interpretations. And I just want to say, going into this is for fun. This is okay to disagree, but also it's okay to disagree, and that please be nice to us. These are and we even went about it like Princess looked for different qualities than I did in assigning to characters. We're going to tell you who we picked and why, and you tell us in the comments what you think. Play along, but please don't get upset with me if Mark Rosewater said, well, actually, Quark would be mono red, and okay, that's great, but I have a different interpretation. And the method that we did use was we want to look for an existing card, so this is a little different. We want to look for an existing card that we feel we could put the character onto. So instead of inventing our own mechanics for each character, we're looking to kind of create a skin or an altar, as you would, for each one. And so we're going to rename the cards and we're going to put the Deep Space Nine characters on them, but keep the existing mechanics. And so we're going to start with Captain Cisco, and we each have a pick for this one. Princess, why don't you go first? What did you think for Cisco, if we're looking for a card to be Captain Cisco of Deep Space Nine?
Captain Cisco. So the first one that I thought of was, I love her, Sissay, Weatherlight Captain, captain on captain action. And Cisco's a character who knows how to bring people together, to kind of like bring out the excellence in everybody. And part of what this card does is it brings out other legends. And as Sisay gets stronger, the team gets stronger. And I think that's very true for this show. Cisco is someone who, you mentioned he's a builder. He doesn't just build things, but he builds relationships and bonds, and he knows how to strengthen them. And he cares so much about having a crew that feels safe and loved and supported. And so I feel like he'd be a commander who just wants to bring out his entire legendary team and have them all just go on adventures and just win the day. So I picked Sisay Weatherlight Captain, and it's Wooburg, so everyone's invited.
I really love this pick, and I wanted you to go first because I actually think that is now my pick. So when you told me Sisay Weatherlight Captain, I'm like, oh, it's perfect, especially the idea that the captain brings in their crew, right? Mm-hmm. And so Sisay does that mechanically, but that's Cisco too, is that he's assembled one of the finest crews in the galaxy, and then he brings in all these other legendary characters we're about to talk about. And I do love the idea of Cisco being all 5 colors to allow everybody to be in the commander deck, but also the fact that Cisco, more than any other captain, I believe, is the most likely to incorporate everything, because he's willing to do everything and anything. And we all know from In the Pale Moonlight that does mean anything. And I think that he has access even to tap into that black mana as he did in that episode.
Absolutely.
But my pick would actually be Kenrith, the Returned King. And this is focusing again on the idea of the builder, but I like that Kenrith is a card that builds in each and every color. So Cisco is willing to do anything that needs to be done, and that in a way is embodied by each of those different colored abilities of Kenrith. And I think that that's very Cisco to me. And also, you know, the Returned King, remember that even though, and I'm going to say spoiler alert here, even though Cisco does die in the end, his last words to Jake is, "I will be back." And that's that idea of he is going to return. And the writers said that they really wanted to emphasize that he wasn't abandoning Bashir or Deep Space Nine or even Jake, especially not Jake, that he was simply to be gone for a while and then he would return. And so I like that synchronicity with Kenrith, the Returned King. Next up, we're going to talk about Major Kira, and this one you're going to lead us through. Major Kira.
I love Major Kira Nerys. Queen. So for the colors I picked for her, I picked Boros, red and white, and the card that I based her off of was Aurelia, the War Leader. When I think of Kira as a character, I think she's both defined by her faith and the fact that she is a warrior and someone who fights in the name of that faith. And for her, she's someone who fought to emancipate Bashir from her captors. And while I think there is an earthy, almost Gruul element to her, she's a battle angel. Like she deeply, deeply is defined by her faith, but she also has an ability to go for the jugular. She is willing to make those hard sacrifices and those hard choices. And that's what angels do. They fly and they kick your butt, but you know, in a godly way. And so her new name I picked was Kira, the Warrior of Bashir.
I think that's such a great pick for Major Kira. And by the way, I will always think of her as Major Kira later on when she got the promotion to Colonel. I mean, she deserved it.
Yeah.
It didn't
doesn't roll off the tongue.
Phonetics for me. I loved the Major Kira. Colonel Kira, I think it's the similarity phonetically that made it sound a bit cartoony to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm always going to call her Major Kira, but that is such a great character. Boros and Bajorans, definitely red, white. Boros and Bajorans. You know, when Deep Space Nine was on the air, my mother was working as a waitress at a delicatessen in Hollywood. I grew up in North Hollywood, and my mom was working at a delicatessen in Hollywood proper, and it was in a location where sometimes, you know, the movie stars and stuff would come in, and they had a rule that, you know, like you don't ever, like if somebody comes in, you don't ever bother them and stuff. But one day, Nana Vister came in, who plays Major Kira, and I was such a fan of the show. Like I literally had the schematics for Deep Space Nine up on my wall. I had my everything, I all that stuff. And when that happened, she went up to Nana and said, "Hey, I know I'm so sorry to do this, but my son, it means so much to him." And she got an autograph for me. And I remember it was on the little, in those days, you'd write up the check on the receipt. It was on the receipt slip. And it just said, "Hey, Brian, you have a really cool mom, Nana Vister." And I lost it. I lost it because I was a teenager.
No!
And I didn't frame it. I know.
Oh my God.
But I still
I'm
have the
devastated
memory.
for you. I truly
Yes.
That's amazing.
And then, years later, my mother, after she could no longer be a waitress, did some extra work, and she got on an episode of Deep Space Nine as an extra. And in the episode where Major Kira is in the cards, which is one of my favorite episodes too, where Major Kira is delivering her speech that she needed Jake to punch up the jokes to and stuff at the end, and there's a big crowd of Bajorans all clapping. One of those out of focus background Bajorans in that episode is my mother. And she got an extra, she was so excited, she got an extra $100 or whatever, because they had to put makeup on and stuff. And she was telling me they instructed us that Bajorans clap like this and stuff. So yeah, I love Major Kira.
That's amazing. Oh, your mom. That's so sweet. I love that. Who is next on our ensemble?
Okay, well, I'm going to do one, and it's Odo. Now, before I fell in love with Jake, I did love Odo because, come on, he's a shapeshifter, and it's a really cool shapeshift ability. It isn't just like I look at you and I become you, but he's made of liquid, and he has to shape himself, and he can do wild things like, extend his arm, or we didn't see it too often because it's an expensive effect. We see it once or twice. And that's costs money, kids, but yeah, that's a lot of money. But he doesn't just, and his face looks the way it does because he's, if you have clay, maybe you're not very good at sculpting, and he's apparently not that good at it. He can't make himself look like other people because that's a little too difficult, but it's not that type of shapeshifter. But I really more liked, and what resonated with me as a kid was how he felt alienated and one of a kind and alone and hurt and isolated, and I felt that way a lot in high school. And so I really, in an intense way, attached to Odo until Jake decided to become a writer, and then I attached to Jake. That's how that. And then when Nog said to Captain Cisco, "I just want you to give me a chance. I have something to offer. I want to prove it." That's when I attached to Nog. What I'm saying is all the characters are great.
I'm gonna cry.
Special.
Nog is my baby.
Great.
Nog is my baby.
I know.
When Rom stands up for him and is like, "My son is gonna do this," and he irons his uniform. I'm schwitzing. I can't. It's too good.
Yes. Yes. We'll get to Nog and Rob in a minute, but for Odo, I envision Morophon the Boundless, because this is essentially, come on, it's Odo the card in a lot of ways, or it's a changeling the card, 7 mana of any color. It's another Wooburg though, but this is the tribal changeling. It's a changeling. Odo's a changeling. It's perfect. So here he is. That's Odo. That could be Odo and the way that they've illustrated, not that I'm not picking the cards based on the illustration, not that that's not okay, but for me, it's just more that it's the mechanics of it are so Odo, and we literally have changeling the card. So that would be Constable Odo for me. And I wanted to go with Constable Odo as the rename, but I went instead because he was always a little like, remember, Odo was not keen on being on that. That was the name of affection that they had for him, but he was always like, "Ha! Constable, I'm chief of security." No real sense of humor about that unless he was torturing Quark. He didn't really have much in that way. So I just went with Odo, station security. That's what Odo would want, to the point and perfunctory for sure.
Very dignified.
Okay, so speaking of characters that came over from The Next Generation to Deep Space Nine, we have the man himself, Chief Miles Edward O'Brien. You are going to tell us your pick for a legendary card that represents O'Brien. I actually have one I want to offer as well for this one. We'll see our different opinions. But Princess, take us away first. Who's O'Brien?
So I'm gonna say the difference. I think the major difference between how we picked our cards is that I really did go for aesthetic. I really did go for like, how does this card capture the essence of this character? Not so much the mechanics, because you're the mechanics king and I'm just the feels person. So I picked for O'Brien Fiddlethip, the Lost.
So why? Tell us why, of all of Magic's legendary creatures, Fibblethip is the one that resonated with you. I know your reasoning on this and I love it.
Because every O'Brien episode includes pain and him being missing or separated from somebody. Like, it's O'Brien the Persecuted, which is my new name for this card. Because every O'Brien-centric episode is a Grecian tragedy, and I'm just like, why is it never happiness? He's either being captured, he's being tortured, his wife is being tortured. I'm just like, when is he gonna catch a break? When is the working man gonna catch a break?
That would have been a good one. O'Brien, the working man.
O'Brien, the persecuted working man.
Right. I was thinking more mechanically myself, and I went with Sharoom, the Hegemon, because O'Brien is the guy who fixes anything, and Sharoom is the commander that brings artifacts back from the graveyard. And Deep Space Nine literally was in the graveyard in the first episode of that show. The Cardassians trashed that place, and O'Brien brought it back from the grave. And that's what he was, the miracle worker, and what he was famous for, fixing and all of this old technology and making things work. He's the engineer. And so I was tempted with another card that actually went to another one of our characters later. But when I thought of O'Brien, I think, yeah, he's the guy who brings artifacts back from the grave. And so that's who I went with.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and I would again, just being the perfunctory type, just be Miles O'Brien, chief of operations.
Yes, very dignified.
Very, very dignified. Very dignified. Speaking of the senior staff, what about Lieutenant Dax? Since you're spotted out for the Trills tonight.
I spotted Queen.
You spotted Queen. What about Lieutenant Dax?
Lieutenant Jadzia Dax. Okay, so when I was thinking about colors for her, I immediately was like Selesnya, green and white. Even though she has a little bit of Klingon in her soul, I really see that for her. And the card I ended up picking was Emera, Soul of the Accord. What Emera does, which is not relevant to this because I went for aesthetics over mechanics. Whenever Emera, Soul of the Accord becomes tapped, create a 1/1 white soldier token with lifelink. Those tokens are just the people, are her lovers. They're just the people that have all fallen in love with her over time. But the reason why I picked this card is because Accord means like the concept of being harmonious or consistent with something. And Dax is in accordance with herself. You know, as a Trill, she contains many, but is able to maintain within it this personhood, to be able to go back in these memories and have all these things to tap into as a person. So she's in a perfect harmony with who she is as a person, except for like 1 or 2 episodes where it's like, you have a secret, you know, Trill, you know, person before you who's evil. But other than that, you know, she is someone who very much represents in the series this fun, sensible, but loving person. And I see all of that in Selesnya in that color. And I just felt like, you know, to me, it's Jadzia, the Klingon-hearted Trill. She is just this vivacious but harmonious figure. And so that's why I picked this card.
What a fantastic pick, and what a great character too. And so you actually, you told us at the beginning you're going through Star Trek in out of order, so you actually haven't gone through the Next Generation yet, have you?
I have not.
Right. So I remember I was writing you about, here's the order of seasons.
Yes.
Don't start with season 1 about that, but for TNG, which I'm also a fan of, one problem the show had was its 2 women characters, while they were very strong characters, there were some areas where they were lacking, one of them in particular being the ability to, I think, just be strong physically. And I remember one episode where Deanna Troi has to beat up a bad guy, and she literally grabs a pad off the table and whacks him with it. And she's like, ah! And it's just really was nice with Dax that we were able to have a strong woman character. I mean, with Kira too, obviously, but Kira was designed that way. And I think with Dax was finally we reached a point in understanding Star Trek and its struggles with women, I guess, but in understanding that, just be like she could, of course, punch someone, like we didn't have Dr. Crusher or Counselor Troy just making a fist and punching anyone throughout the course of TNG, to my knowledge, and I think that was part of a bit of a gender awareness issue that the show had. But Dax, it was like, yeah, of course, she just punch him. Every Starfleet officer should be able to do that. Dax could too. And then we leaned into the Klingon stuff, and yeah, she's good with a bathleth. Absolutely, she'll kick your ass.
Which I ordered. I ordered one. That day I was like, I'm ordering a bunch of swords. I ordered a bathleth. I just want it.
You're one of those nerds, I see. Yes.
Listen, it's not a Keyblade. I did the best I could. Just to add on to what you said, the other thing I do like is that Dax and Kira are friends, and they hang out, and they go on things together, and I love that they are two women with different priorities in some ways, but they're never in competition. They're always just, if they are, it's over their idealism and their philosophies about things, not about like men or sex, anything to do with sexuality. Like, they are in accord with each other most of the time.
I'm glad we never got the episode of Deep Space Nine where Major Kira and Lieutenant Dax fight over a boy or something like that. That would have been a bad episode. Bad episode. So we didn't get that. We got a cool relationship, and I liked her relationships. It was a very interesting idea to say her relationship with Captain Cisco.
I was going to say that.
In her past life, she was his mentor, and she was an old man, and now she's in this young, attractive woman's body. And I liked that they also said, no, he's able to just be friends with her.
Yes.
He's a single guy. They go, and that it's like, no, he's able to just be friends with her. There is no romantic interest between them. With the exception of the
we don't talk about that episode.
We don't talk about that episode.
Okay,
that was Star Trek. Oh boy, when Star Trek goes off the rails, Star Trek goes off the rails.
I always say Benjamin Sisko, feminist king, except for that one episode that we don't talk about.
But he didn't, he was like, his first reaction to Dax kissing him and stuff was, Dr. Bashir, something's obviously wrong with her brain. Like, I like that he immediately was like, oh, okay. I mean, so yes, but I like that she was able to have that relationship with him, that her relationship with Worf was, I think, one of the better ones. I loved their wedding, and her bachelorette party was a lot of fun, and she had great relationships with everyone. She even was able to build a solid non-sexual relationship with Dr. Bashir.
Yeah. And they're just able to be friends.
Yeah, even though, and he came on in a way that I think she would have been justified following a workplace harassment complaint against him in season 1, probably.
For sure.
But after that, he chilled out, and they became just platonic friends, and the show was able to show us, yep, you can have that happen.
I would be remiss if not to mention the immense queer fandom around Dax as being a character that is constantly in flux when it comes to gender and gender presentation, and also that one episode where you see that one of her former partners is in a female body, and they're both in female presenting bodies, and you see that they have a deep love and attraction for each other still. And I think for like a certain generation, because I talked to them, that was part of their queer awakening, and there is a very big queer culture around the Trills and Jadzia specifically. So, she's the ultimate pansexual representation.
She was. And that episode that you're referring to was the first lesbian kiss on network television.
Yeah.
And so Star Trek gets the award for first interracial kiss on network television and first lesbian kiss on network television. And I think they did a very good job in terms of, again, this is an area that, as much as I love The Next Generation, they tried once and they did okay, but not, from what I've I've read from queer voices that great of a job with it. So at least with Dax, they were a little better about it, and they were able to tell mature and enlightened stories about somebody who in one lifetime is in a male body and in another lifetime is in a female body, and what that means for our concepts of love and sexuality. And they probably could have done more, but what they did for the time was pretty impressive. Great character.
Absolutely.
Before we get to Dr. Bashir, I want to talk about the character I hated as a kid and love as an adult, which is Quark. I loved Odo, but I was not a fan of Quark, and that's probably because I didn't have to work for a living as a kid, and I didn't appreciate how incredibly funny a character in Star Trek that is still obsessed with money really is, and all of his rules of acquisition and comments on society and having to work and scheme and plot and just steal enough to get ahead. As a kid, went right over my head, and when I rewatched Deep Space Nine by the time I was in my 20s, I was just laughing hysterically because Quark sometimes is the smartest guy in the room.
Absolutely.
Sometimes Quark really is. I envisioned Quark. I thought, what colors is Quark? And no, Quark is not colors. Quark is one color, and that color is black. And out of all the mono black legendary characters in Magic the Gathering, if we're looking mechanically, I was drawn to Gaunty, Lord of Luxury, for Quark. This is a card that goes through your opponent's deck and steals stuff. And then also, but the whole using mana that you have as if it were mana of any color is also, you're getting away with something. You're breaking the rules here. I'm going to steal your mono red card and I'm in a mono black deck, but you know what? I'm going to spend my black mana as if it's red mana. I feel like the only thing about Gaunty that isn't Quark-like is the death touch, because Quark was a very bad fighter, and they always did that. He could barely hold a phaser in the few times he tried, and was not good at that stuff. So I don't know about the death touch, but I love the mechanic effect of him digging through your opponent's decks, his opponent's decks, and trying to just take whatever he can take. To me, seemed like a very Quark quality.
I love that. Although that episode where he did have that Klingon bride, they were
good together.
He did put his foot in it. That was a good couple. I shipped it. Worf was so offended when he saw them make out. He was like, "What? What's this?" He was so salty, and I was just like, "Worf, it's okay. You're gonna get Dax. It's all gonna come full circle, babe."
He got her in that episode. That's also funny too, where Deep Space Nine was able to have those, dare I say, human moments where Dr. Bashir, I love at the end of that one, walks into the infirmary, and because Klingons are apparently a little rough when they mate, and he's just reading his medical report pad, and he's like, "Bruised ribs, contusions. What have you two been up to?"
Compound fracture of the right radius, 2 fractured ribs, torn ligaments, strained tendons, numerous contusions, bruises, and scratches. What have you been doing?
You mean, what have we been doing?
Never mind. I don't need that particular image running around my head.
And then looks up at them and they're just cackling. It's like, no, got it. Never mind. Got it. Klingons are on the station. People having sex. Just nobody tell me anymore. Don't need to know. I'll be over there.
I'll be in my bunk.
I'll be in my bunk. I'll be healing all your sex bruises.
Poor Julian.
Poor Julian. Speaking of Julian, Julian's next, and you're going to take us through your Dr. Bashir card. You have a very interesting pick.
Oh, yes. So Bashir was really hard for me because he's just he's a really interesting character in how he really evolves from season to season and builds. I think my friends always call him, he's the ultimate boyfriend, because he just loves to be around every male character and be like, "How about we be best friends?" And him and O'Brien trying to be friends for like the first 2 seasons, I was like, I would just watch this every day. Plus Garrick, of course. I ended up feeling like the colors that really represented him were Is It, blue and red because of his backstory. So the card I ended up picking for him is Ludevic, Necro, Alchemist. And I mostly picked this character, this card, because of what it looks like and what it kind of symbolizes. So the card is a human wizard. At the beginning of each player's end step, that player may draw a card if a player other than you has lost life this turn and also has partner. How does one become a self-taught genius? Naturally, it requires brains. The draw card stuff wasn't really the big thing, but the partner I think was so good because like if anyone wants a partner, it's Julian. Like he is such a partner-driven person. He wants to be like in connection with other players, but most importantly, his backstory of being someone who was genetically engineered by his parents to excel academically. And I found that to be really compelling. So I feel in that regard, it kind of illustrates all the kind of complex, almost alchemist-is-it things about him. He is this person who feels things very passionately, but also has this very cool deductive part of himself. And so I felt like by picking Is It and picking an Is It card, you really get to have those two phases of himself.
That's, I really, what resonates with me is that idea of him being partner, because he was like that, especially early on, where he wanted to be everybody's friend and did have that cool friendship with O'Brien, and he was originally interested in Dax and later on just was a kind of partner character. He does make a good partner. He was another one. I had a hard time with him, I remember as a kid in season 1 and 2. And then in rewatching it as an adult, I really saw what they were doing and what he was doing too. Sid is just an amazing actor.
Amazing.
Just amazing. I'm surprised he hasn't shown up in more stuff. He popped up in Game of Thrones briefly.
Yeah.
And he was in Syriana briefly, but it's too bad a lot of these actors get typecast, and we don't really see that much of them.
I know.
Dax turned up in Becker.
After you left, Sarah ordered a dinner to go for her babysitter and a whole bunch of desserts for her kids.
You let her get away with that?
Well, what was I supposed to do?
You pull out your calculator and you play Who Had the Chicken Salad?
I know.
That sort of thing.
Alexander Sig was in Gotham for a few episodes playing Ra's al Ghul. And I just remember thinking
Oh, that's a great part for him.
I was like, finally someone cast Ra's al Ghul properly. And I was so happy about that, but he's not in it for very long. But I just know that if they ever do League of Assassins storyline again, get Alexander Sig back because he's a perfect Ra's al Ghul. Like,
yeah,
no notes.
I think he's super talented as an actor. I mean, they all are, but in particular, he's just fantastic. What do you think? I'm curious about the whole genetically engineered change to his character. It was never something I was big on. I was like,
it feels very like tacked on to kind of give him some more tragedy almost. Like it feels like a very dramatic twist. I don't think it really benefited him, but I do think that with his slight inferiority complex that we do see like drips of it throughout the season, it kind of made sense as to he's always kind of wondering if he actually deserves what he has, and also why he's so sympathetic towards the genetically engineered creatures that the Dominion use, that the Changelings have, because he's empathetic towards them because he also is someone, I did it, English major, he's also someone who has been changed to fit someone else's purpose. So I think in the grander scheme of what Star Trek talks about science and humanity, it's interesting, but I think it would have been stronger if it had been something that we knew about earlier. Like it comes out of nowhere in a sense, more than feeling organic.
Yeah. It's interesting too, and I mean, this was the last era of television where they were really latched onto that idea of at the end of an episode everything's back to normal and none of your main characters die, and we weren't in the golden age of television where it was like, oh yeah, kill off a main character, oh yeah, we can shake up the status quo in a big way as a big part of storytelling, and that was Deep Space Nine was treading the waters with that, where they're like, okay, that was later in the show's run, we're going to permanently and fundamentally change who this man is and who his character is. And I liked that. I guess what I didn't like was that afterwards they wrote him as having heightened intellect, and he would quote off statistics and in a way that was supposedly, more than an average human. And I think that they robbed him of some of his humanity in doing that, and that it would have been better for him to still be the same naive, energetic, brilliant doctor. And it's just a matter of, well, he's in a sense normal as a result of the engineering, and that you could have still, I liked the Jack Pack episodes and such. I thought those were very interesting, this idea of how it could have gone wrong. But I think that having him so heightened in his intelligence afterwards was not, I think, keep him as he is and just say he got that way because of illegal genetics work. And you can have a conversation about why that's wrong and Star Trekian and all that stuff. But yeah,
I totally agree with you. Now we have your turn. Did you pick our Klingon, sensitive, poetic Worf boy?
I picked everyone's favorite opera-loving Klingon. He certainly got fleshed out. He another transplant from the Next Generation. I am so interested. So here's the thing. When you do get to the Next Generation, oh my God, I can't wait to talk to you once you start watching TNG, because it'll be so interesting, among many other things, to see your take on how Worf is presented in that show, because there's a lot to talk about there, and I think that he got fleshed out so much more on Deep Space Nine. He was a cool character on TNG, but he was often in the background more. There were some cool Worf-centric episodes, but he was a little less three-dimensional, perhaps. And in Deep Space Nine, they fleshed him out, and I was thinking, what colors is Worf? And I thought maybe gruel at first. But there's more to Worf than that, because Worf is a damn stickler for the rules. Worf is just such a by-the-books, anal-retentive individual, and he's about honor, he's about strength, and he's also idealistic. He believes in that law-binding community together. And I actually started to think Naya was some really cool colors for him. I actually think Ajani is a cool and Magic the Gathering, character to associate with Worf in some ways, but we can't have Ajani as a commander. And so I was looking at the Naya Planeswalkers, and I'm thinking, which one of these is Worf? Is it Mayel the Anima? Is it Zakama Primal Calamity? There were some powerful ones, and I finally settled on Samet, Voice of Dissent. Out of all of them, I felt she was the most Worf, in that she's just really this well-trained, seasoned, battle-ready character. Flash, Double Strike, Vigilance, Haste, but also as Worf, as the Chief of Security and Strategic Operations later on. On TNG, he was Chief of Security. On Deep Space Nine, he was Strategic Operations, and giving other creatures you control haste, so he makes your team better. Because let's be honest, if you're beaming down into an unknown situation, you're pulling your away team together, who do you pick to come down with you? You probably want Worf on your team. If it's any sort of unknown situation, Mr. Worf, come on with us. He's going to make the team better being there. And also Samet has the ability to untap another target creature. There's a little bit of protection, there's a little bit of strategy, and there's a really well-trained warrior. Definitely went with Samet as Worf.
That is such a good choice. I would say, if it wasn't Samut, I would say any of the Radas. I feel like Rada is Worf. Worf would crush on Rada, because that is so his type of personality.
It's an interesting, I like that you picked Rada too, because we saw Rada kind of grow up over 3 cards. And I mean, come on, we watched Worf from TNG to Deep Space Nine, and he was supposed to be on TNG. He was just a lowly lieutenant. He wasn't even Chief of Security originally. He had no real job. He was just in the background with a couple lines, and we watched him grow up over the course of over a decade. And so that's an interesting parallel as well, watching Rada grow up. What did you make of Again, as someone who didn't see TNG, what did you make when Worf showed up right away? You were familiar, of course, that he was coming over from the Enterprise, but like, did you know anything about his character ahead of time? Did it feel out of place to you or forced in? At what point did you accept him as a member of the crew? What were your thoughts on that?
It's funny because I was coming into it so late. I always knew that there was a Worf. So I was waiting for him to show up. It was kind of like Dawn on Buffy. I was like, so when is Michelle Trachtenberg gonna like be on this show? So I liked him instantly because I just like, oh, he's a Klingon, but he was raised by humans. Check. Love that trope. He is someone who has this deep sense of honor and loyalty. And all throughout that season where, the Klingons are about to go to war with the Federation and you see these two parts of him being like torn asunder, I was instantly engaged with him. And I also just like the Klingons. I have always seen them and known of them from when I would catch some episodes of Star Trek when my mother was watching it. So I always was like, oh, a Klingon. I'll probably like that character. So I was already Team Worf for a long time.
We still have not touched on Jake Cisco, and you're going to tell, you thought of, I'm going to be honest with you. I was very protective of Jake. Like I said,
I know.
He was a character I resonated with. And when you said, it was the first character you said when I said, well, let's divide up the characters so that we save some time. And then you said, Jake. And I was like, oh, no, not Jake. She
Not my
picks
boy.
Jake. And so that's where not my boy. And then I said to myself, I'm going to have my own pitch for Jake. And then you told me your pitch. And I was like, it's the most brilliant one. You've got it. You nailed it in one. Who do you think Jake would be of legendaries?
So the legendary picked the colors. So I ended up giving him Chulane, Teller of Tales, because obviously,
Yes.
So it was like, there was one joke about making him Teferi's daughter character, but really it's Chulane. He's Teller of Tales. The new card name for him is Jake Cisco, Chronicler of the Defiant, which I was like, that's a good one. I was like, mwah.
That's a good one. Now, I'm going to do a deep nerdy dive, though, as a Jake Cisco fan, and say, though, that I would like, as an alternate name possibility, with all due respect and deference to your own, the novel, this is if you go to The Visitor, and they reveal that the famous novel that Jake Cisco, who as an old man in The Visitor was likened to maybe like J.D. Salinger or something. He wrote that one brilliant novel and then retreated from the world, and that was named Anselm. And we never knew what it was about, really. I think it was a very dark and painful tale. Jake was very unhappy to be on Deep Space Nine, especially early on. He lost his mother. But whatever it was about, I would say that maybe we would go with just Jake Cisco, author of Anselm. But of course, if we're talking about Jake Cisco, we have to also talk about his best buddy, one of my favorite characters, Nog. Let's talk about Nog. Cadet Nog, Ensign Nog, or just originally Troublemaker, Delinquent Nog. What an amazing character journey. If you had told me in season 1 that Nog, who we first meet breaking into the infirmary and getting arrested by Odo, is going to end up outranking Miles O'Brien. By far, it's such a great journey. The thing with Nog that really resonated with me is that idea of like, you think I'm trash, but I know I have something to offer. Mm-hmm. And that's what Star Trek is about. And that scene with Captain Cisco is to me very, very Star Trekian. And Deep Space Nine got away from some of the Star Trekian idealism, but it was still about, I've got something to offer. I want a chance to prove it. And I loved that was what Nog became. Mm-hmm.
Nog is an amazing character, and I agree with everything you said. And through him, you also got Rom. his evolution of being a supportive, caring father who was also able, through his son inspiring him, able to uplift himself beyond what a Ferengi was supposed to do. And I think that's the best thing about Deep Space Nine, is like no one is just simply who they are expected to be. They can always be defiant about who society thinks that they should be.
Absolutely. And I think Rom is a great example. I mean, season 1, he tries to murder Quark. And by the end, he literally is in some ways responsible for saving the Alpha Quadrant from the Dominion, and talk about a huge evolution. With Nog, I picked Shram, Senior Artificer, Mono White, and this is the artifact guy. This is the guy who works with machines and gets knowledge from it. And I originally thought of this card as one for Chief O'Brien, but I ultimately settled on it for Nog as just being, he was this tenacious, get things done, and it was through that tenacity and that knowledge and working with artifacts, and he was still kind of monocolored, and he became very, like the idea of Nog as mono-white, you know, that's not what you think of with a Ferengi, and that's not of what you think of as Nog maybe season 1 and 2 and such, and maybe that's not, but by the end, Nog was absolutely about the laws and the order and the procedure and all of that stuff, and he became fascinated with engineering and using engineering to get ahead. And so that's why I went with Shram, Senior Artificer. For Nog, Tenacious Ensign is what I would call him, because I liked that tenacity. That was a word that Aaron Eisenberg, R.I.P., would use about, he would say tenacious is how he always interpreted his character of Nog. And I like that. So Nog, Tenacious Ensign. I
love that. That's so perfect for him.
And then for Rom, I'm going with Is It. And I think we're going to go a little bit further and say that Mizzix of the Is Magnus, the ultimate storm commander, is who I would have for Rom. And my thinking behind this, besides just that Rom was the ultimate tinkerer and person who rigged up Bajoran Ferengi Federation and Cardassian technology to work together. When I think about Mizzix and this idea of a storm commander, at first it's hard to see how powerful she is until you actually play against her or with her in a properly tuned deck, and how far that goes in terms of just getting out of control and out of hand. And I feel that's the same way with Rom, where he starts out very subtle, very small. Rom couldn't fix a straw if it were bent, but then by the end he's creating self-replicating mines for mining the wormhole and saving the Alpha Quadrant. And so I think of that just escalating progression of technology with Rom, and I would definitely name the card Rom, Idiot Genius.
Aww.
He's both of those things. He is an idiot, and he still was kind of an idiot, but then he would just be like, oh yeah, genius, genius things. And he ends up being Grand Negus because he understands how rules, regulation, and environmentalism and rights for women is all profitable, more so than the current system. And that understanding is what's going to put him in charge of the new Ferengi Empire.
Rom, he's the feminist icon. I will also say Rom is the perfect archetype of the fool, because the fool is the character, the figure that is meant to be farcical but is always speaking truth. And I think that's very much who Rom is. He looks silly and he acts silly, but deep down he's the one who knows what's going on.
He's great. And, we were talking about family with the Ciscos earlier. It's interesting that the Ferengi ended up being a core family of Deep Space Nine as well. And even with things like Rom marrying Marta and seeing Quark and Rom's Moogie and in the Grand Negus and just this wide concept of the connections that you make. It's such a huge cast. We can't go over everybody. We were having lots of debates. I'm sorry, fans of Sloan and Eddington. I sent out a tweet about Eddington, only I disguised it as being about Les Mis. We can talk about Sloan. I mean, come on, Lazov the Multifarious and such. But I do want to take a minute to still talk about the two big villains of Deep Space Nine, because Deep Space Nine did villains great. They had the great, and there were lots of villainous characters, and even really three-dimensional villains like Damar, who starts out as a villain and then ends up not being a villain at all. But we got to talk about Kai Wynn and Gul Dukat for sure.
You skipped Garrick there, dear.
Oh no, I skipped Garrick. But wait. What do you mean I skipped Garrick? Garrick was just a plain, simple tailor. You think there's more to discuss with Garrick? The plain, simple Garrick? Just simple Mr. Garrick?
You're right, I forgot. He's just an innocent tailor. He just hears things as he's like Timna the Weaver, just simple tailor.
Let's talk about the real villains of Deep Space Nine. The two biggies. We've got Kai Wynn, right? And we've got Gul Dukat. Why don't you start with Kai Wynn?
Kai Wynn, Nurse Ratched herself.
If Mr. McMurphy doesn't want to take his medication orally, I'm sure we can arrange that he can have it some other way.
Walk with the prophets.
Nurse Ratched!
Nurse Ratched herself. So I picked black, and I think you could also make an argument that she is kind of a black-white because she believes like fanatically what she believes, but I still made her black anyway. And the character that I picked for her was Arya, first of Loxswain. Whenever Arya, first of Loxswain, or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Sacrifice another black creature, draw a card. So I picked this card for her for two reasons. One, Wynn would absolutely sacrifice anyone in her way to get her goals. Whether it be her own people, whether it be parts of her own faith, she has loyalty to herself and to what she thinks is absolute when it comes to her, her ambitions to become Kai. And she is patronizing and frustrating and just everything that a religious leader should not be. And the other reason why I picked this card is because if you look at the art, she looks like an evil Bajoran. And she's got the nose piercing and everything. I'm like, that is how Kai Wynn sees herself every day. That is big Kai Wynn energy right there in that card.
As queen.
Yes.
I totally see that. She was such a good villain.
So good.
I have a different card to submit.
Yes.
Which is, I think Kai Wynn, and so when I was a teenager, which is very common for a lot of teenagers, I did have my own little streak of being very, very, very adamantly, passionately filing complaints to the school board passionately about organized religion. And so I was very much a fan of, unfortunately being 16 or whatever, when you file an official complaint about the Halloween pageant as being forced religious ceremony, that doesn't go too well. Oh, I was a real kid. But
sweetie.
Nonetheless, that panned out interestingly. But nonetheless, I very much adored that the villain of Deep Space Nine, one of the villains of Deep Space Nine, was the leader of organized religion for Bajor, and that she was a hypocrite, and that she ultimately turned on her own faith for power and all of this. But when I think in Magic the Gathering, of a Magic the Gathering card that is the ultimate religious leader, who is one of the biggest villains in Magic the Gathering, I think Mono White, and I think Elish Norn, who is the leader of the Machine Orthodoxy on New Phyrexia, who is a terrible, twisted individual or soul, if indeed Phyrexians have souls, which they do not, according to lore. But whatever she is, Elish Norn is indeed a villainess of epic proportions, and she's absolutely difficult to deal with, and who I would pick as the legendary replacement for Kai Wynn. But yeah, Kai Wynn is just such a great villain.
Especially just as soon as she comes in and she's like touching people's ears and just like, you're a pop. I was like, immediately, I was like, I don't like you because you're just, you got too much you're doing. Stop touching people, consent, stop being in people's personal space. Leave Kira and her boring love interest alone, but.
Kira and her boring love interests. That's a whole podcast by itself.
Dude, I was like, Kira, look at you. Look at him. Now back at you. Now back to him. Why?
I'm so glad to have met you because I'm so glad finally to hear another person that agrees that Kira's love interests were definitely less exciting than they could have been. They didn't know. These writers did not know how to write a good love interest for Major Kira, that's for certain. Gul Dukat. Now, here is the villain to end all villains. I think Gul Dukat is a better villain than Q himself. I think Gul Dukat is the greatest villain in all of Star Trek.
I said bow. You are pathetic. Then why are you the one on your knees?
Dukat is definitely mono black, and I was looking through mono black commanders and thinking which one of these mono black commanders is Gul Dukat, and the answer is Sidisi, Undead Vizier, is absolutely Gul Dukat. And I didn't just go with the most powerful mono black commander that I could find. I really wanted to tap into who and what Dukat was, and I love that Sidisi, Undead Vizier, has that exploit mechanic. When this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. And when you sacrifice a creature, you may search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. She's got Death Touch. She's mono black, but she's Gul Dukat, because Gul Dukat sacrificed everything to get what he wanted. Much like Kai Wynn, they were a very good pair of villains there. And Gul Dukat sold Cardassia down the river. He sold Cardassia out to the Dominion. He sold everybody out except save, I suppose, his own daughter, which her dying drove him mad. But he was absolutely the exploiter of Bajor, the exploiter of Cardassia, the exploiter of the Alpha Quadrant, and the greatest villain Star Trek has ever known.
He is the absolute worst. And I also hate how he's always creeping around Kira. Get away from her. Get her job. Get away from her. She doesn't want you. And now, not my baby. Not my Kira. Right. Get away from her, you creepy you creep.
Thank you, Nana Vister.
She said no. She was like, absolutely not. She's like, no. And I was like, because they would absolutely do that. And I'm just like, thank God that someone with sense was just like, canceled.
It created a good dynamic then so for those at home, the original plan was they did want Kira to start to have a love interest in Dukat. And Nana was like, that is ridiculous.
He's Hitler. He's Hitler.
He's her Hitler, for God's sake. Oh God, the monetization again.
Sorry.
He's her. Well, actually, this applies. He's her PewDiePie. That applies.
That might get you lawyered up.
That's one of the ones you got to think about. You got to think about it a little bit. But yeah, and so she was like, no way. And so they said, all right, well, what if he just wants it and he's delusional about it? And then it actually works really well for this lunatic villain. And he's just like, well, of course she'd want me. Of course she'd be perfect. And it's actually like, and joking aside, you talk about whether or not the writers were, like where their failings were. One of their strengths, I think, was recognizing that this man in power and this war criminal and horrible, you can very easily argue the guy had genocide on his hands, and that someone in that power dynamic that they kept writing in, that he really did like these Bajoran women that were under his power to be abused by him and to be forced into romantic, or to use his power to force these Bajoran women into romantic and sexual relationships with him. And you see that in the episode Kira Goes Back in Time, and he's like, wowing her mother with and all that sort of stuff. That's some real dark stuff that they were luckily aware of and wrote in very well to the episodes. But yeah, what a freaking monster of a guy. Nice actor.
Very nice actor, I'm sure.
He got his nose broken in the final episode with when Cisco punches him.
Oh, wow.
Avery Brooks. They both tell the story differently, blaming themselves, which also speaks well to
both of them.
That basically it was a stunt punch, and Mark Alamo says I didn't pull back enough, and Avery Brooks says I leaned in too much, but basically the punch fully connected. It wasn't supposed to be anywhere near it. It was supposed to be camera trickery. The punch doesn't even, he's a foot away, and it just looks like he hits him, and whatever happened, it 100% connected, and Avery Brooks broke his nose. And he had to go to the emergency room bleeding profusely in full Cardassian makeup because that stuff takes hours to take off. So they had to just take him to the emergency room in the middle of the day in LA in full Cardassian makeup. And they both in stories and retellings blame each other and argue about who was, they both get into arguments over, no, it was me. I remember I did this.
It was my fault.
Right, it was my fault. Fun stuff. So there's so many other characters. We can't get through them all.
I think we got all the heavy hitters, and we put our brains and our hearts into this list. I think it's a solid. I think we did a good job. I'm gonna claps for us, or a Bajor. Is it a Bajoran clap? Is it like this?
Clap. They go like this.
There it is. Bajoran claps to us.
Right. Very good. Well, I really want to encourage people to leave in the comments their ideas of these characters, or if you want to expand into other realms of Star Trek, feel free. I'm definitely going to be combing these comments. I'm sure Princess is too. Or actually, maybe once you watch Star Trek The Next Generation, we could do this again. We could do this with other media if you want. What about other shows and movies and universes?
Ooh, Doctor Who.
Oh, we could do Marvel characters.
DC characters.
Farscape characters.
Steven Universe characters.
My Little Pony characters.
Star Wars.
No, the series is over. There's absolutely no legs left.
If you hold up 7 mana and a player is playing blue, what do you suspect?
7 mana and on blue, you're going to absolutely get Cyclonic Rifted until they eventually ban it.
Not when you're playing against Ken.
Because, sometimes I just hold it up just because, just to scare you. And I'll be like, go ahead, put down something. And then as soon as they get back to me, I don't have nothing. I'm just playing around with you.
But one thing I noticed specifically about Newmont, I'm not scared of Cyclonic Rift when 7 mana is up. He has Angel of the Dire Hour. This is a 7 mana, 5 and 2 white, flash. When it enters the battlefield, exile all target attacking creatures.
Gotta conceal those intentions, baby.